Now, there is no doubt about it that ever since the death of Charlie Kirk, we have seen a lot of celebrities, whether it's writers, directors, producers, or even authors out there, and among other personalities like talk show hosts and those associated with late night television, which we will be covering in exactly this post. But one thing about all of this is that we know that they're really beginning to show their true overall beliefs, their true overall colors when it comes to their overall stance on the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's death by this terrible human being, Tyler Robinson. I'm sure that you all heard his name. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So we have a lot of actors out there coming forward, either saying very great things about Charlie, but then on the other hand, you have a lot of actors saying terrible lies about Charlie Kirk, terrible things about him, offensive things about not just him, but also his supporters. But now you have Stephen Colbert. I'm sure that you all know who he is, a very toxic late night show host on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert via CBS. And look, we already know that his show was losing millions upon millions of dollars. It's exactly why it got canceled and will, of course, be scrubbed off the air come 2026, right around the first quarter, I believe it will be. But one thing about this right now is that Stephen Colbert, another individual that actually sent out, his condolences to the family, to the friends of Charlie Kirk, and even acknowledged Charlie Kirk's death in a respectful manner, quote unquote, and then immediately reverted back to his typical self, very much like a lot of others out there did. Now, focusing on Stephen Colbert, alright, now one thing about all of this is that with the death of Charlie Kirk creating such a strong response from many Americans and how they are coming together to support his family and friends after the tragic thing that happened on September 10th by Tyler Robinson, one significant development going on now involves more celebrities showing their true colors yet again and putting their rhetoric on full display to the public, one of which now involves Stephen Colbert, just days after calling for no political violence, and of course how he did that on his show and is already resorting back to his toxic behavior and self. Colbert delivered the following. I look back at what happened on September 10th, and yes, this is something that should have never happened to anybody, but it's also a wake-up call that people like Charlie shouldn't have been putting out his political takes that aren't at all true or based on facts, and it's supporters of Charlie that have encouraged cancel culture. If you don't believe me, just look at what happened to my show and how I will be parting ways with CBS come next year. But not just parting ways, this whole thing is going away. And this is all in connection with President Trump's rhetoric and his supporters that so happen to have also followed Charlie's work. And these are the same individuals that are calling for no freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is dead. These are the same people that called for my show to be booted off the air, and they got their wish come true. And I guess they got what they wished for. And I do wish the best for Charlie's family and friends. I really do. But I think what's more important here is how supporters, of course, of his have done nothing beneficial to society and how we function as people. And this is typical Trumpism that we are living under right now in 2025 and what we have to embrace for the next 3 years. When you have a talk show, you are suddenly intimidated to leave, and if they can't do it through words, they do it through ratings. It's supporters of Trump and Kirk that have contributed to so many innocent American citizens in our country to lose their way and to lose all forms of common sense. But you can't deny the fact that right-wingers, people that Charlie encouraged through the years, it could have been handled better by bringing out actual facts and not just pure lies or half-truths to the people. And this is why there are so many misguided people out there, young people who haven't gotten the chance to learn a thing or two, or to educate themselves on all angles of politics instead of a toxic rhetoric coming from the right. I can only hope that we reach toward a level of normalcy in the next 3 years, where people can finally see through everything and come together. Now guys, let me just say one thing about Stephen Colbert. Now, I will be very direct with you all. I was never a fan of this guy up until he actually began late night television and made it all into political nonsense. Prior to that, Stephen Colbert was, pretty reasonable as an actual, show host, doing his own thing at the time many years ago. But once he got The Late Show with Stephen Colbert at CBS, everything changed, and it changed fast. And we've seen this happen with a lot of programs. Programs like The View, for example, is a very big example over there, and how much it transformed since like 2015, 2016, I should say. If you look years before that, it was a different story. But focusing on Colbert yet again, this is the whole I'm sorry, but I'm also not necessarily sorry type of attitude, right? Basically, what he's saying is that a lot of Charlie Kirk supporters, a lot of Trump supporters out there, just a lot of supporters of, on the right, or people on, the side of Republicans, they are the ones to blame. And I think that this is exactly what's wrong. You can have your political opinions, your political takes all you want. I get that. Believe me, I do. I understand that. But the problem that I have is that this is not the time. It's way too fast. What are we, like 3 days into this thing, and already Stephen Colbert is reverting back to his typical self. And you know what? Look, when he said what he said on his show about Charlie Kirk and how, there should be no political violence, it's always very phony, especially when it comes from people like him. You know that the producers told him, maybe it's time you say something like this. Maybe it's the right time that you actually do something reasonable on the show, because if you say something quite the opposite, it's not going to look good at all. We all know it's phony, it's just all part of the plan, it's all part of the program, and it's not like Colbert specifically decided to say that thing on television, there's no doubt about it. But again, he goes on to conclude, because the lies coming from the right aren't helping us as a society either. Some will say it's not my place to say this right now, and that's fine. But we are a free country after all, and that's in a matter of speaking, of course. Just look at what they did to me and how they are calling for Jimmy Kimmel to be cancelled, and so many other talented people out there. This is the behavior that needs to be stopped. The rhetoric coming from Trump supporters and MAGA is at full force, and it's an unstoppable force, sadly, that we really at this point just have to adapt to somehow. Now again, the problem that I have is how Stephen Colbert is playing the victim card too. Notice how he says, if they can't do it through words, they'll do it through ratings. Well, let's look at some common sense here. They talk about common sense, let's look at some common sense. If they have the power to cancel a TV show through ratings, doesn't that show you that the majority of people do not like your show? Because if it was actually those that were in support of Stephen Colbert and how that outweighed those that do not support him, then the ratings would be fine, wouldn't they? That's your common sense. And basically his show got canceled, let's be real, because nobody watches it anymore. People are tired of the exhausting, toxic rhetoric. And that's obviously coming from people like Stephen Colbert. And it's also tiresome. I mean, literally tiresome. It makes people physically tired of listening to people like Stephen and all the things that they have to say about Trump supporters, MAGA, Republicans, etc., etc. And that's exactly why. Also, Jimmy Kimmel is going down the tubes. That's why he's dealing with a lot of backlash. That's why his ratings are going down. And they have been going down over the years for ABC. But overall, I would love to hear what everyone has to say about Stephen Colbert reverting back to himself so fast, just days after saying what he said about Charlie Kirk on his show. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.